What role should new technologies like robots, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality play in theatrical arts? And how are educators preparing their students for the future of this art form? Hello, you're listening to Where What If Becomes What's Next from Carnegie Mellon University, where we ask the bold questions that become innovations for the betterment of humanity. I'm your host, Randy Scott, and in this episode, we're exploring the future of arts education. In particular, we're focusing on how theater educators are preparing the next generation of performers, writers, directors, and technicians to carry on and push the medium forward. Theater and arts education are essential for social-emotional learning and helping students understand themselves, even if they have no dreams of becoming a Broadway star or Oscar-winning performer. But arts programs are often some of the first on the chopping block in schools short on funding. That's not the case at Carnegie Mellon University, which housed the first degree-granting drama program in the nation. For an institution known for being on the cutting edge of STEM education, CMU's prominence in the arts allows for a unique opportunity for interdisciplinary innovation between the STEM and arts fields. Students, faculty, and alumni are embracing the ways AI, robots, and innovative technologies can create immersive experiences with augmented and virtual reality where viewers can interact and engage with the art, performance, or digital environment. Increase and stimulate creativity by viewing deep learning or chatbots as collaborators, like when human artists work with CMU's AI-powered Frida robot to paint new works. Make art more accessible by granting access to tools like AI music production for people without the means to access a full music studio, or generating subtitles for the hearing impaired at live performances, or using virtual reality to bring people to theaters or galleries they otherwise could never visit. And AI can change the way audiences interact with creative work. Take the CMU student artists who trained a neural network on millions of photographs, so that network could then create new images based on input from the actual viewers themselves. But in order for these types of innovations to happen, arts education must be present, and arts educators have to keep up with all of this innovation to prepare their students for a tech-filled world. So today, I'll speak to two theater educators who are on the front lines of teaching a new generation of AI-savvy theater artists. First is CMU's own Kyle Hayden, the Senior Associate Head at the Carnegie Mellon School of Drama. Kyle, you have a lengthy resume full of all kinds of theater experience: acting, directing, artistic leadership, and, of course, teaching. Now, there's been a lot of change in the theater industry and in higher education since you started at CMU back in 2016. I mean, we went through a pandemic that flipped both of these industries totally on their heads. What are some of the challenges you're facing now?
We're seeing all across the country the rising costs of education, certainly a challenge. I think we're no exception to that at CMU, which is why I think some of the steps that we've been taking to sort of guarantee making college affordable for students, families making less than $100,000 is a big step towards ensuring that education is within reach for everybody.
Great. And there are a lot of college students across the board now who are actually doing the math and saying, is it worth it? It can be much more of an economic decision than a passionate decision, right?
I think that's always part of the calculus for someone doing this. But I also think sort of where we're positioned, nobody is coming to the School of Drama if they're sort of 1 foot in the water or they're casual about it. We see 1,500 to 2,000 students applying for 24 spots in acting and musical theater. So it's really competitive to get in. And so, I think at the end of the day, we're trying to create empathetic, creative artists that are geared to sort of lead the art form forward into the 21st century. And those folks are going to have a set of tools and skills that are going to allow them to be flexible and competitive in whatever they decide to do. So, we don't know what theater is going to look like going forward.
Yeah, we've talked about some of those challenges, but at the same time, those same challenges could be creating opportunities. What kind of innovations have you seen coming out of the last couple of years?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that happened during the pandemic is we obviously got much more comfortable being on camera in our living rooms and thinking about, digitally how we can communicate. So, just the thought of how we sort of make things, how we communicate in boxes, right? So the idea of an education, a program being geared just for theater, right? I think we've moved away from that in some respects. That doesn't mean that it's not important. It doesn't mean that we're not gearing graduates to work in theater. We absolutely are. But also students need to be able to work in other mediums. You know, they need to be able to understand on camera to what it's like to work in film, in television, right? To work in music. You know, one of our fantastic lighting recent hires has worked with concerts, you know, and the sort of dramatic lighting, you see her work that she's done with rap concerts, you know, is really exciting to see. So just thinking about how you sort of apply those skills, what does it mean to light an event, right? As opposed to a play. If you're doing costumes, you're doing costumes for a play, you're doing costumes for an opera, you're doing costumes for film, you know, those skills are all transferable. And so I think people are less afraid maybe to talk about those things. It's okay to think about your training in this medium because it's easier and more accessible to do a play. It's less expensive to do a play than to do a film or a movie, right? But I think it's easier now for people to understand how to translate it from that medium to other mediums. I think that the pandemic and the fact that we were all trapped in our houses and having to use our computers, our phones, you know, telling stories, making art that way, in some ways has, you know, made it easier for all of us to sort of translate things in our imagination.
Yeah, that's a good point. But now at the same time, you're in an institution that is one of the leaders in new technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer-generated graphics, images, holograms, or robots, one of our favorites. How are new technologies either changing the way you teach or the way theater is produced for audiences?
We're still tinkering with these, trying to figure it out. One of the interesting things is that theater is, we're deliberately inefficient, right? Because there's a human element, you know. What is fascinating to me about theater, and I'm specifically talking about theater, is that there's this two-way communication that happens between an actor and audience, you know, when, you know, the things that has been set up by, you know, the things that are built on the stage, you know, the ideas that the director has and the designer has supports the actor. And so when the actor delivers a line in a certain way and the audience laughs, right, the things that the audience finds scary or funny or sexy informs the actor's next line, right? And so this sort of two-way communication happens, and this piece of ephemeral art is created each night that can't ever be recreated, right? The next night, the actors will come back, they'll do the same play, directed by that director with the same set pieces, same lighting, but it's a different audience, different reactions, right? So it's a totally different piece of art. So in that way, AI can't replace that. Machines can't replace that. But I think there are some interesting things that can happen in support of that. And so I think we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we use AI to supplement things, to make things easier, to help in the training of it? You know, those are the things that I think we're interested in finding out, the things that are being experimented with in our lighting labs. You know, we have a new sort of lighting technology degree that's been formed in the last couple of years. You know, how does that technology play with sound, with lighting in our shops, and trying to figure those things out, how we do it. But in the actual performance of it, right? Maybe you will see us do a performance with a robot, a dance with a robot. That could be interesting, and I think it would be a fun thing to see. But at its core, it has to be inefficient. There has to be, I think, people involved. That human element in that sense, I think, is what makes it really, really interesting.
Let's talk more about collaboration that could occur, or maybe has already occurred among the different disciplines within the university. So how do the arts and sciences help each other improve, or maybe think of things in new ways?
For me, it's a sense of inspiration. And so when I'm walking around campus, when I'm introduced to people, having conversations, when I'm out in the community and, you know, identifying myself as somebody who works at CMU, it's something I just think about all the time. But it's like, how do we sort of make those interfaces, make those connections? And for me, it's all about when I am recruiting on the road or I'm talking to first years. It's not only because I grew up here and I'm very proud of the city, but just for their edification. It's like, get out of the building, get off campus, get into the city, get to know what's here, get to know who's here, because you just never know what's going to be a source of inspiration for you, what's going to take your art to the next level.
Outside of your work on campus, you have a brainchild that is all about collaboration. You founded a production development incubator called Collabo, which is a space for theater producers who are making new work to get them help with production challenges from designers and other theater artists. What inspired you to start Collabo?
A lot of the new work places in the country is really playwright focused, playwright centered, which is great. It allows you to sort of lead with story. You get a chance to have readings, sort of work out what the story is, the problems in it. But when you have, an obstacle, there's a lot of times not time or money or resources to be able to figure that out. And so we wanted to sort of provide a place where folks could do that. And a lot of times when you're telling stories of people who don't see their stories told on stage as frequently, it's a lot easier to just say like, we're not going to do that. We're going to put this over here. So we wanted to provide a space where, hey, you can come work this out, bring your team with you, have some financial support, have some institutional support, a place to stay, have a chance to interface with another group of artists as well who are doing different kind of work. Get to know some Pittsburgh artists as well, because we have a great artist community here.
Yeah, totally. That sounds really cool. It seems like it might be ripe for using some of the technologies we talked about earlier. You could create model scenes or scenarios without the expense of building a set to see if in a workshop environment those would actually work.
Exactly. The first year we had a group that was had a play that was built around a hurricane happening on stage, and so they were able to play with some different ways in which to make that work. One of the things they used was like, how do we use fans? They used light, different types of light techniques, but just trying different ways to see high tech and low tech to find the best way to tell the story and to make it believable for an audience. So sometimes the solutions are high tech and maybe they're more expensive. Sometimes they're low tech and not expensive. Sometimes producers like both, right? The Broadway version can be very expensive, but sometimes a regional theater, may want the $20 version of it. And sometimes the $20 version is more effective.
Gotcha. The inefficiencies you were talking about earlier, yeah, that makes sense. Thinking about financial limitations, how do the institutions make sure that kids of all kinds are getting access to theatrical education?
That's a great question. We're looking for imaginative, empathetic artists, so I think in order to do that, you have to be curious and wanting to understand about the human condition, not sort of thinking you know it all, but being curious and open to others, to other way of life. It's a big country, it's a big world, and I think there's a certain open-mindedness that's necessary to doing that, to empathy in that sense. So, I think if we stay curious and stay open and keep exploring, hopefully we can inspire our students to do the same thing. And hopefully if we keep looking for the type of students that will do that sort of helps that.
All right, let's zoom out a little bit here, Kyle. Why does theater education matter? What are the students learning aside from how to act or light a stage?
I think a lot of the skills that we're learning here in theater are teaching us to be better human beings. Honestly, it's an ensemble based activity, right? You go to a play, you might go to a one-person show and you see one actor on stage, but that one actor has dozens of people supporting them on the stage, right? They're lit, they're wearing clothes, right? You're hearing, announcements and sound cues, right? Someone's telling them, has helped them to know where to go, right? You had to buy a ticket from somebody, right? And so all these things are sort of helping to support that. All these people have to work together in order to coordinate that. So the sort of cooperation that's necessary, I think that's part of like what we're helping to put together and teach. So I think a lot of these skills are highly useful for life. So, it's not a sort of a kumbaya thing to say that, we're like hopefully helping to make better people.
How do you see theater and theater education remaining relevant and on the cutting edge moving in the future?
I really do feel like that this is the key to bringing people closer together. This idea of empathy. I feel like when you see somebody, when you see their story, it's harder to reject them. It's harder to close the door in their face, right? When you sort of know something about someone, So I feel like this idea that we're, sort of going to get a chance to see more people's stories, hear more about their stories. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the blend of technology. We do a lot of work. We have a fantastic video and media department. And I think you're starting to see more of it on Broadway, but I think you're going to see it more in smaller theaters, regional theaters, the blend of media, of technology into live theater, still having that sort of person-to-person connection, but also not being afraid of mixing in technology and using that. I also think, I directed a show here in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago where we used some live polling with cell phones. We let the audience have their cell phones and, they're able to affect the show a little bit with the vote. So I also wonder if you're, going to find a way to see that, to use these devices that we have on us all the time and find a way to embrace that instead of fighting it as much. Is there a way that we can take advantage of that and use that? But I'm firmly convinced that, because of the ways in which we're disconnected, right? Because of the way in which we use social media, because of the way our attention is fragmented, there's going to be something about gathering together in person that will allow live theater to endure, right? I think we see it with sporting events. I think we see it with concerts. And I think it's just about the sort of right economic model and the right messaging to get it out for theater. I don't know that we've cracked it yet, but I think it's coming. But I'm very bullish on the future of it. And of course, Carnegie Mellon's place on it. I think you sort of see how our graduates are doing, what they're doing. And I'm very high on the future of it. So I feel good about it. I feel good about, the prospects going forward.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, I'll speak with Roshunda Jones-Kumba, the recipient of the 2022 Excellence in Theater Education Tony Award.
Within the College of Fine Arts at Carnegie Mellon University, we believe the arts and arts education enhances our world for everyone. Participating in and exposure to the arts helps all of us become more empathetic, well-rounded individuals who contribute greatly to our society. At Carnegie Mellon, we believe the strengths of the arts, combined with the power of technology, help us to discover how what if becomes what's next.
Welcome back. You're listening to Where What If Becomes What's Next from Carnegie Mellon University. Before the break, we talked to Kyle Hayden, a professor in the CMU Theater Arts Department. Each year, Carnegie Mellon partners with the Tony Awards to recognize theater educators. Kyle was a part of the selection committee for 2022 when Roshunda Jones-Kumba was honored.
There's a sort of light about her. She just is a really kind, smart person that has an endless degree of patience, but also is able to sort of be like, you need to do this. So you could just sort of see that way that she was able to reach the students, connect with the students, but also to sort of keep them on the right path. She's really special.
Roshunda comes from a family of educators and always knew she wanted to be a teacher. But it wasn't until college that she realized her calling was to teach theater, in a subject she says that is absolutely essential. I got the chance to speak with her and want to share our conversation now. Roshunda, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me. You are a huge champion of the arts and theater education. What does arts education give to students that maybe other subjects don't?
You learn so much from being in the arts. It teaches you empathy. It teaches you resilience. It teaches you to be a better human being. And that's, as a teacher, you want to be a person who changes lives. Because in my classroom, yes, we have some students who go off and major in theater in college or take it on professionally, but some students just take it as an appreciation, but they are better at whatever profession that they pursue. And that's what I love, because being in theater, I have students who leave out of their 4 years and they have found their purpose for life. And so that's my main thing in teaching, about creating human beings who are going to be productive members of society.
Outstanding. You teach at George Washington Carver Magnet School in Houston, Texas, which has specialized programs in technology and the fine arts. Very similar to CMU, by the way. Talk to me more about that. Why is it important for a school to have those disciplines together?
I think it's very important because each discipline can learn the importance of one another, because STEM is really important, but the arts are equally important. And then when you put them in a school together where you can focus, that offers that collaboration. It is nothing better than when we have like an engineering student who takes our class for their arts credit. And then they are like, oh, I never knew about this world. This is interesting. I'm learning so much about myself. Oh, can I come and help after school? I said, yes, we can use you on the tech side. Sometimes they want to be on stage. And we're like, come on. And vice versa. So, and at Carver does a really good job of integrating. And because we're a magnet campus, we always have to do like integrated productions or integrated curriculum as far as learning about each art form and each discipline. So it's a really good collaboration between all the programs. Collaboration, everybody says to collaborate, but collaborating is not easy. It takes work. It takes compromise, but how you both can grow from it is worth it. And your students' growth is even more worth it. So just try. And it could be something, just start. And once you see that, then it can just build into something more beautiful. But just to do it, collaborate.
Great. Well, everything you're doing is clearly working. You received a Tony Award for Excellence in Theater Education. How did it feel when you found out you were being honored?
Yes, and I must say that it was the highlight of my time as an educator. It was, I'm still wrapping my head around all of it, and it's almost 3 years later. But I was nominated by my students and the technical director at my school. So that day I found out, I was in total shock. We all were in total shock. I received my principal called and said, I have some important people on the phone. And I was like, important people on the phone, you know? Sometimes you never know when the principal calls. You're like, what did I do? But then they were like, it's the Broadway League and the American Theater Wing, and congratulations. And my mouth, my mouth was just open. And then all of a sudden, then the kids heard that everybody came in screaming. It's just a big celebration that particular day, but life-changing to say the least. And it celebrates not only one thing that you've done as an educator, but almost kind of like a lifetime achievement, kind of like a culmination of all of your work. Because whenever I started learning more about the process, and they were like, okay, we noticed that you did this. And I was like, I didn't even remember. So they do a really good vetting process on the whole thing.
Great. Let's talk experience for a minute. What was the kind of work that you were doing that stood out above the rest of the other great applicants who were nominated that year?
I would say, that if you just walk into my classroom, my space, you can just tell immediately that it's a safe space for students to grow. And also that our students are thriving. And yes, we have received awards. Awards are great. I love awards. We go out and we compete. They're great. But are you a better human being? Have you learned something from this experience? And so when you walk in, the students have a sense of pride. It's tradition. It's a legacy when you walk through the doors of the school. And as a result, we have flourished in things like the Texas Thespian Festival, the International Thespian Festival with the UIL One Act Play, the Tommy Tune Awards. And all of that is just a result of the culture that has been built at our campus.
That's great and great to hear. Do you have any stories of students who have been maybe transformed by theater, or you've seen them learn some of these lessons right in front of you?
Oh yes, I have several of those stories, and we do this show. Our very beginning show of the year is called Theater Recitals, and so we just do scenes from shows, monologues. But our freshmen, we require them to do a monologue. A lot of times they have never, ever performed a monologue in their entire life. And some students, you can see how terrified they are. And they're like, I can't do this. And we say, hey, we're going to coach you through it. It's going to be fine. And then some students who could barely speak, and they are so proud of what they've done. I had one student who, she was taking the class, and we were doing Cinderella. And so, and her grandmother really wanted her to be involved. And I said, well, come on to the audition. And so And she barely could sing. And I was like, okay. And I cleared the room because sometimes we'll have like multiple students come up. But for her, I was like, I just want to hear you 101. And then she started to sing and this beautiful sound came from her. And I said, wait. And then she ended, I was like, oh, and I was like, you have a gift. And I said, just allow us to work together and cultivate that gift. And from that point on, she was Cinderella that year. But she just went on to thrive and do well. And that little girl who wouldn't say 2 words in class was a leading actress by the time she graduated. And those are what it's all about. Just seeing students come into themselves and become confident, because that's just going to help them succeed in life.
Great. Well, you certainly have a unique vantage point when it comes to seeing how theater education functions at the high school and collegiate levels. So what kinds of challenges do you see facing theater education, say right now?
Funding is a never-ending struggle, especially within the arts, because it's just sometimes people don't see the value in the arts. And so that is always one of my things that I like to advocate when I do workshops, the value of the arts and how this is a beneficial program. Like if we're thinking about cuts, let's not try to cut the arts, because when we're cutting a valuable piece of education. You need it. And a lot of people, I use the word elective. I'm like, no, we are a core class because we are just as essential as any core class. So funding is always a never ending struggle.
Now at George Washington Carver Magnet School, you're in a pretty unique position where the arts and sciences exist in close proximity. How do you think technology will play a role in the future of theater and theater education?
We do have to embrace it in a sense as far as using it as a creative partner. I would say we're going to use it as a creative partner. We can get ideas and things like that, and maybe that help spark something with us. So just kind of using it as a resource, but not the main thing. I don't want a whole script that has been AI generated or a projection design that's all AI. I want a little of the human connection, the human touch to that. So using it as a creative partner, I think that would be the best way, because it's not going away. So we do have to embrace it in a certain type of way.
Gotcha. So is that the future? Is that what could be coming next for theater education?
Next for theater education. If I look into my crystal ball, I would see that an increase of awareness of everyone of how valuable the arts. It won't even be a question. We want no longer be advocating for arts education being everywhere. It just is. It's just a part. And then in the future, of course, I'm excited to see where we're going to go with technology, because we're such on the forefront of different things happening. So I'm even more excited to see how that's going to change the landscape of productions and all of that. That's interesting as well.
Well, that's all for today's episode. A special thank you to my guests, Kyle Hayden and Roshunda Jones-Kumba. And a special thanks to you for listening. Please check the show notes where you'll find links to additional resources for this episode. And if you want to learn more or contact us with a story idea or any comments, please visit cmu.edu/whatsnextpodcast. If you are enjoying this show, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast site and share with your friends. And be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. You've been listening to Where What If Becomes What's Next from Carnegie Mellon University, where we are asking the bold questions that become innovations for the betterment of humanity. Stay tuned and stay curious.